Hello, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to my talk on BIM Resistance Management, how to navigate the reluctance to adopt BIM on projects. Before I start, I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me to speak today, both in front of the crowd in person and then online globally. By way of introduction, my name is Rory McCormack. I'm currently studying a master's degree in architecture at Queen's University Belfast. I'm an architectural assistant with White Ink Architects, who I'm speaking on behalf of today. I have a background in BIM consultancy and lecturing with Belfast Metropolitan College, advancing our local and national industry knowledge, industry BIM knowledge, all of which has led to over 3 years of BIM industry experience, ranging from limited BIM implementation on projects right up to the very best that BIM has to offer, but more on that later. White Ink, who I'm representing today, are a mid-sized, high-performance architecture practice based out of Belfast, Northern Ireland, and we have projects right across the entirety of the UK and Ireland. We were established in 2001 with over 40 staff, and in our 20th year of business, we became an employee-owned trust. Our project portfolio includes high-end, high-density residential projects, as seen on the top left of the screen, and also includes hoteliers, offices, education infrastructure projects, working with clients such as TransLink, Premier Inn and British Land, to name a few. Sorry, my pages are a wee bit all over. With introductions out of the way, the talk is broken down into 3 parts: the what, the why and the how. The what being what is BIM and BIM resistance, the why being why BIM resistance occurs, and finally how we can try and overcome the inertia that this puts in place with some tips that are hopefully universal across all levels of BIM implementation. Just a very brief matter of setting the scene. So what is BIM? I'm sure we all know, but just as a matter of recapping, as opposed to focusing on the standard BIM information modelling meaning of BIM, where it's all about a data-rich 3D model, I want to take a look today about building information management, how as designers we can affect the management of information throughout the building's life cycle, as without the appropriately designed in data, what use is a complex 3D model. As designers and often lead appointed parties, we find ourselves representing the start of a very lengthy documentation process, so it's the first principles that we instill on a project that often see it through to fruition. So then, what is BIM resistance? It refers to resistance or reluctance to adopt BIM. It can manifest in various forms, and it can hinder an otherwise seamless workflow of information. Take the somewhat oversimplified diagram of an electrical resistor on the left of the screen. We see the information being produced for a project indicated by the BIM execution plan. Granted, if you've gotten this far, there's very limited BIM resistance. To then what we hope is the information being delivered to a client outlined in the employer information requirements. All it takes is resistance from the information being taken in to where and when it needs to be delivered to derail an effective collaborative BIM workflow. So, how then does BIM resistance manifest? Why does it happen? It could be for a variety of reasons. Lack of familiarity. If parties are unfamiliar with the methodologies and technologies associated with BIM, it can prove a very daunting hurdle to overcome. In a similar vein, there's the initial fear of change. The old adage, if it isn't broke, it doesn't need fixed, where companies have been operating with a very traditional construction process. It can be very hard to break down that line of thinking and embrace new technologies. There's one that people most often need the most convincing to tackle, and that's the initial investment that high-end BIM implementation requires. And finally, there's the preconceived complexities and misconceptions that parties simply just assume BIM's too complex, it's too difficult, and they can only focus on the potential issues that BIM adoption will create without considering the potential benefits that they're losing out on. So with that being said then, how have we at White Ink overcome this resistance? So we started by establishing an office-wide BIM protocol that bridges the gap between industry standards and non-compliance to provide a framework for implementing standards within our projects that mightn't be fully BIM compliant. We can use BIM principles to maximise workflows across the office to standardise the obvious, like file naming and folder structure, right down to the not so obvious, like high-level approaches to asset management and family creation. As BIM outputs are only as good as its inputs, we've developed an in-house CDE that can allow us to data mine both external consultant inputs, but also prehistoric projects to allow us to learn lessons on mistakes that might have been made in the past, allow for better database decisions to be made going forward. That's not to say that we haven't helped deliver various BIM Level 2 projects like the Ulster University campus in the Belfast City Centre seen on the right of the screen. To assist in this delivery, we have a range of tools at our disposal, with a primary focus being Revit. We have over 10 years' experience in Revit, allowing us to help deliver fully coordinated 3D models, as well as help deliver intelligent, adaptable family libraries that can streamline project management and utilise modern methods of construction, including digital fabrication, prefabrication, and lean construction principles. We also have an MBS course for designing integrated performance-based project parameters, Dynamo for workflow optimization, and various others that help end-user engagement and on-site coordination. So then, if you're currently faced with BIM resistance, what steps can you put in place to overcome it? Over the next number of slides, I want to go through some interventions that I found conducive to an effective, productive BIM workflow, the first of which being education. With the first stumbling block in BIM adoption being parties' lack of knowledge of understanding of what BIM means, education can be a vital first step in mitigating some of those early stage misconceptions that parties might have. It may seem trivial, but ensuring that all parties are educated on not only what BIM is, but why it is being introduced in a project is key to start realising the benefits that BIM can offer. It's not only the parties that you're operating within, for example, the design appointed party, but also the task appointed parties delivering the information at that stage, and then to follow the construction appointed party that will assume responsibility after you've finished, assuming then that is the end of your scope. At White Ink, we often find ourselves bridging the gap between design and construction, and it's amazing to see the difference that educating parties on why certain principles were instigated early on can prove instrumental in their success within both the context of BIM and the wider project. Similarly, communication and collaboration across parties can be a simple step in reaping the rewards that BIM optimization can offer. Ignoring the obvious that to be in BIM you need to be collaborative, I'm talking here about a step beyond information sharing. I'm talking about opening lines of communication between all stakeholders about the process of information sharing, prompting transparency to enhance the overall project efficiency, encouraging regular project meetings to discuss how effectively the workflow is being managed, and using collaborative tools to share BIM data and project updates to mitigate any data silos by the lack of interoperability, something I'm sure our state sponsors would be happy to weigh on. Here's a practical use case of what I mean by effective communication. This is one of our projects over in London. It's a residential scheme where we have 8 interfaces all coordinating around one junction, the prefabricated bolt-on balconies. With our in-house VR suite, we invited the contractor and consultants to virtually coordinate all of these interfaces into a typical section. Hopefully. This allowed us to discuss tolerances and setting out principles that could be addressed across the project, allowing any misconceptions that might arise and manifest themselves in the VR suite as opposed to on-site, allowing a smooth transition from the virtual to the reality. That leads me nicely on to the next tip, which is identifying and addressing any challenges with BIM adoption. With BIM, there can sometimes be the misconception that once you know BIM, you know it for life. But with anything, standards evolve, project requirements change, and it can be difficult to navigate. That's why as a BIM coordinator on a project, you should allow for these challenges that are resulting in resistance to be flagged and addressed if and when they appear. By merely addressing the challenges a party is facing head-on and workshopping the solutions, it can lead to regular project improvement and greater project success, rather than the still useful but less conducive lessons learned later down the line. Tip number 4 is the addition of technology, both hardware and software, something that's been touched on a lot today, so I'll not go over too much. But I appreciate that in an ideal world, to operate a high level of BIM, it requires a technological investment in software with the hardware to match, compared to the more traditional information production methods. Staff then need to be trained in utilising these tools to access a more streamlined design process. That's not to say, however, with the appropriate in-house quality control, you can still leverage the power of BIM without all these fancy softwares and hardware, but it's something that should be considered, as it may be leading to the resistance that you're facing trying to convince a party to switch. Here we see a number of our completed projects at render stage in VR compared to the then realised projects on site, showcasing the power of a fully coordinated data-rich 3D model can offer in delivering a project. we can then allow clients to market their assets accurately before completion. And lastly, it's important to build a strong BIM team. Resistance to BIM adoption doesn't always manifest itself externally, and that's why having a strong, diverse team within the office with the right mix of skills is integral to an effective BIM implementation, both internally and externally. We're proud to have an in-house team that can provide specialised training to staff to enhance the BIM capabilities of the office, to ensure that we're at the cutting edge of the AEC sector, and to constantly be evolving our understanding and appreciation of BIM. This also then extends to the wider BIM team, promoting collaboration and assigning clear roles and responsibilities can be pillars to developing a strong, cohesive project BIM team. So, too quick. Before I go then, just what I would like to leave on is it's important to know the limitation of BIM. As I'm sure we're all aware, so yeah, it's promising nearly there. I'm sure we're all aware BIM's great. We've hopefully all seen firsthand how it can improve our day-to-day tasks. It can allow for better architecture and it can improve the longevity of buildings, but it's not a silver bullet. Without robust protocols in place, the necessary training and other points I've touched on, an effective workflow can very quickly unravel. So if I was to finish this talk the same way I started, if you're currently experiencing BIM resistance on your projects, start with the what, then ask why, and hopefully some of these hows can help you improve it. Thank you.